right, welcome to the 13 News Now Digital Election Special. I'm Janet Roach here with you this evening. We're streaming live to bring you all of the updates on the big races tonight as they come in, and we have team coverage for you tonight. I am joined by political reporter Mike Gooding and CNU political analyst Quentin Kidd, and we're going to have in-depth analysis on the races and what we know so far and what is yet to come. And of course, we're going to start off with the biggest race, what everybody is watching right now, and that is the presidential race. Good evening to you guys.
Hi, Janet.
Hey, Janet.
Okay.
Let me begin, Janet, with this. This is, I've been doing this a pretty long time. This is my 8th presidential election night, dating back to 1992 when Bill Clinton defeated George H.W. Bush. So this is my 8th one. And what I'm here to tell you is the longer I do this, the more I realize how little I know. I am completely stumped by everything at this point. The Associated Press called the race in Virginia for Joe Biden at 7:37 p.m. And yet, as we look at the latest numbers from the Virginia Department of Elections, as of right now, with 1,942 precincts of 2,585 precincts in, Biden is losing 40% to 57%. That's 270,000 votes. So I've got political expert here, Quentin Kidd, and I'd just like you to maybe weigh in on what in the world you think is going on here.
Yeah, explain that.
I was going to say, the AP is doing, it's a combination of exit polling and modeling. And so that's why they were confident in calling Virginia when they called Virginia. But also let me explain something about where the vote is and where it isn't this year, which is what makes your point about, since 1992, there was a pattern in how we watched votes come in on election night. And this year that pattern is totally different and totally new. Normally we watch the vote come in that was cast that day. This year, there are twice as many votes cast early in Virginia than were cast on election day in Virginia. And so 2,135 of 2,453 precincts have reported in-person voting today's vote, but only 42 of 132 central absentee precincts have reported any of their early vote. And those 132 central absentee precincts are where all of the early vote is going to get put this year. And so we're talking about 3 million votes that are going to get put into these 132 absentee precincts, and that's where the bulk of the votes are going to come this year. And so the answer is, quite frankly, we only know about 37% of the vote right now. A big chunk of it's going to be coming in those absentee precincts.
But so the Associated Press is really taking a leap of faith here, though, aren't they?
They are. Based upon what we know about who voted early, they're assuming it's going to be a Democratic vote that voted early. It's going to be a Republican vote that voted on election day, which is why if everyone's watching the returns right now, it looks like Republicans are doing really well. And they are doing really well on election day votes. We need to wait until that absentee vote comes in, and we may not get it all tonight. We may get some of it tomorrow. And this is why, everybody should be cautious. The AP clearly wasn't as cautious as I'm thinking everyone should be. But literally we have about 2 votes absentee for every election day vote. And we know the election day vote, or we're going to know it before the end of the night. We're not going to know all the absentee vote by the end of the night.
And so I'm thinking if you and I are as somewhat puzzled as we appear to be, Janet, I'm assuming you are too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at these numbers like we are.
Well, I am, and I'm texting with family members, and they're saying, oh, yeah, we see that Biden is losing Virginia. And I'm thinking, well, no, I think that the AP already called Virginia, and they're telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm like, hey, I'm the news person. But so, yeah, I've been pretty confused, too, by some of these numbers. But we know that this is a very unusual year with all of the people who voted early. So many people voted early, particularly in Virginia Beach. Think about how long those lines were for several days. And then the lines were not as long today, but just, Virginia had, several weeks of early voting. And it seems like every single day people were standing in line waiting to vote. And then, of course, that all of the votes that were mailed in as well that Quentin has been talking about. But we do know some things about the presidential race. We do know that there have been several states called for Biden and President Trump.
Yeah, that's right. And critically, none of the battleground states, none of the states that really matter. The state, now Virginia's been called already, and again, that's based upon that same AP modeling. But really interesting, just south of us, North Carolina, 77% of the vote in North Carolina, but the AP has not called North Carolina yet. And that's because North Carolina does their vote counting the opposite of the way Virginia does. In North Carolina, they're counting the early absentee votes early and reporting those numbers early, and the election day numbers are going to come later. So remember, that early absentee vote favored Democrats. So in North Carolina right now, Joe Biden is leading 51% to 48%. But critically, the election day vote is more likely to be a Republican vote. And so the AP is not calling North Carolina yet because what looks like an early Biden lead might turn into a really tight race or even a Trump lead by the end of the night.
And another state that I'm looking at right now is Texas. If you would have told me a year ago that Texas could possibly be blue, and it may not yet be, but as of this second, it seems to be leaning kind of blue, at 49.6 for Biden to 49.0 to Trump. So it's very, very close.
Right. Yeah, Texas has not gone Democratic at the presidential level since 1976. It has been trending toward Democrats over the last several years, and Democrats felt really good about it this year. And I should say this: the election day vote in Texas is more accurate. So what we're seeing right now is a more accurate reflection of what happens and is going to happen in Texas, because the rules in Texas about early voting were much more strict than they are in Virginia. So far fewer, as a percentage of total voters, far fewer voters in Texas voted absentee this year, and so more voted on election day. So the results we're seeing right now tell me Texas is going to be a really close race.
And talking about Virginia a little bit more, since we are broadcasting from Virginia, no Republican has carried a statewide victory in Virginia since 2009.
Right.
But who knows what yet could happen tonight based on the numbers at this second, without the absentees and the early votes you're talking about. Virginia could go red.
Yeah, I
don't think it will.
Unlikely, but yes, it could. And if it doesn't go for Trump or Gade, that's simply another year post 2009. We're talking about a long time drought for Republicans in statewide races, suggesting that Republicans need to rethink their strategy, rethink how they run statewide in Virginia.
Well, let's talk about
so
some
people
of
like me. And, go ahead, John.
Well, I was just going to say, before we go to some other races, I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the battlegrounds in the presidential race, because Ohio is looking interesting as well. And then, of course, everybody's going to be waiting on those three firewall states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. What are you seeing in Ohio, Quentin?
So Ohio, like North Carolina, is reporting votes cast before Election Day at 8 o'clock. So they reported about an hour and 15 minutes ago. And this is what has everybody looking again at Ohio, because Joe Biden is leading Donald Trump in Ohio with just under 60% of the vote in, and that includes all those early votes. But again, Election Day voting is thought to favor Republicans this year. Early voting thought to favor Democrats. And so with a 52 to 47 lead for Biden, with 60% of the vote in, that 40% of the vote that's still out could very well be a Trump heavy vote, and it could make Ohio much closer than it is right now.
Okay.
I think Pennsylvania is very important.
All right, and Mike, you had a question?
Well, I just continue to be amazed at how stupid I think I am tonight, in terms of just every time I think I know how this is going to go, I become defied, in terms of how it actually turns out. And the thing I think I want people to remember at this point is it is only 9:14 p.m. A whole lot can change between now and the next couple of hours. So just because something appears like it appears at this second doesn't mean that's the way it's going to ultimately end up.
Right.
And that's the confounding thing here. That's the frustrating thing, because I think people want definitive answers, and we're just not able exactly to provide them yet at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
we're trying.
We can't. So, take the 2nd congressional district race.
Right.
Right now, nearly 3/4 of the vote is still out. Right. So about 28% of the vote is in. So right now, what looks like a heavy Taylor lead over Luria.
Yeah, 60% to 36%.
Is a heavy lead over Taylor lead over Luria.
Right.
With 28% of the vote in. There's a ton of votes still out there. So whatever we said right now is very likely to change in the next hour or 2 hours.
Right, and so that's where I still become perplexed about calling races this early in the night.
Right.
You know,
Right.
because I just think we might end up being totally wrong, and I like to be right.
In more,
Mike
I know
Gooding
this is outside of our viewing area,
98%
but
of the
in
time. I was saying Mike Gooding
you
is
are
right
right.
98% of the time.
No, I would say perhaps in between the 6 o'clock news and now, perhaps you went somewhere else to have some liquid dinner, if that's what you think, because I think that is untrue.
Coffee. Okay.
Okay, all right, I accept that.
All right, so Quentin, you were going to talk more about that 2nd congressional, the second district. I mean, Luria, she's down in Norfolk as well, and when you look at the Norfolk results, and you see the Biden results, he's way ahead. Warner is way ahead in Norfolk, but Luria is still a little bit behind.
Yeah. The Norfolk results, the numbers that are in the 2nd district in Norfolk are about 11,000 votes. And there are about 19,000 votes yet to be reported that are those early absentee votes. So literally double and then some of the vote that's in is still out. And so we're still waiting on results. Again, Luria's, she should expected to do really well in Norfolk, expected to do, well in other parts of the district. But again, a lot of that early vote is still out. Now, I was going to say, compare the 2nd district, which is a much more urbanized, suburbanized district, and the 7th congressional district race, which is the Spanberger Nick Freitas race, and the 5th congressional district race. The 7th is a mix between urban and rural. The 2nd is pretty urban, Eastern Shore rural. The 5th is mostly all rural. And in rural, and the 5th also is a much more Republican-oriented district. And so there were far fewer voters who voted early absentee in the 5th. And so in the 5th congressional district, 60% of the vote is in, whereas in the 2nd, only 28% of the vote is in. And so that's the difference between the early vote and the election day vote. The early vote tended to be a Democratic vote. The election day vote tended to be a more Republican vote. And in our poll that we did in the 2nd congressional district, we asked early voters who they had voted for, and there was about a 2-to-1 advantage for Luria. So it was a Democratic vote that voted early.
I'm looking at the Senate race. That was called pretty early on for Mark Warner in the evening. But yet, as of this second, according to the state website, he's down 56 to 43. So I think it's the same phenomenon you're talking about in the other races.
There are 1.8 million votes counted right now, reported right now in the U.S. Senate race. There are going to be 4.5 or more million votes total cast and counted. So that just gives you a sense of how many votes are still out. And we know where 3 million of those votes are. 3 million people or so voted early in Virginia.
But I don't think he's going to lose by 20 percentage points like it appeared in the polling earlier last week.
Well,
but he could.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, that's just, that's what, everybody has been cautioning for a couple of days now. Take the early returns with a grain of salt, because there are lots of votes that still have to be reported. And Janet, to your point earlier about the city of Norfolk, my understanding was that the city of Norfolk was a little bit behind in getting their early absentee ballots processed, and there might be a little bit of a delay in Norfolk, and so that may be part of what we're seeing there as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And looking more closely at the poll that you all did, you also found Luria to have an 18-point lead among women, and that is significant. 34-point lead among independents. What does that mean, Quentin?
Well, it means less this year than it has meant in years past, only because the electorate has become so polarized that there are fewer independents these days than there used to be. I say used to be in years past. But it means that, you know, in a typical election, independent voters, wherever independent voters break, that's typically where the winner goes. And so it's significant in the sense that it probably explained why we had Luria up by 7 points in that poll.
Mm-hmm. And then 23-point lead among college-educated voters, 9-point lead among voters 45 and older, and her favorability 38%. So, you know, she said today, of course, you know, as we had our crews out covering all of the races, and they still are, and she said today that she felt pretty good. She felt energized, feeling pretty confident that she would keep her seat. Meantime, of course, Scott Taylor saying that he felt pretty good, said he had some unfinished business because he only served one term. There were some things that he still needed to do, and both of them out to the last minute, stumping for votes in Virginia Beach. Of course, that is the largest part of that district. It also covers what parts of Norfolk, Poquoson, York County, and I believe Hampton, and even some in Williamsburg, if I'm correct.
Yeah, you're right. Even Hampton, Poquoson, James City County, York County, Williamsburg, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Accomack County, and Northampton County. I think that makes up the second.
You know, one thing we were talking about before we began this broadcast is the second district itself has had a lot of turnover in recent years. For 18 years, we had a fellow named G. William Whitehurst who sat in that seat. And then 14 years thereafter, we had a fellow called Owen B. Pickett. So we had 32 years of fairly consistent leadership in the second district.
Yep.
But since then, you did a quick count. What was the number of?
Six.
Six congressional people since 2001 in that seat.
So there's been a lot of turnover. That reflects two things. It reflects the competitive nature of the second congressional district, and it also reflects in a really competitive congressional district. It's hard to stay in office very long. Either you get tired of constantly having to fight for your seat, or you get bumped out. You know, you lose to a newcomer. And so I think all of that explains the 6 people who served in. I mean, you know, think about somebody like Glenn Nye, who won that race in 2000, won this district in 2008 on the coattails of Barack Obama, promptly lost it in 2010.
Right. And so for Taylor, who lost in 2018 by 2 percentage points, it had to be quite tantalizing to think to yourself, well, maybe I can get that seat back.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, in his mind, again, we've talked about this before, the animating issue in this race has been that ballot signature scandal. It was the animating issue in the closing days of 2018. So if you think, you're in his mind, you think, I did nothing wrong, I'm innocent, I'm going to go fight for my seat, that seat back. You know, it just adds to the momentum, adds to your energy to say, I only lost by 2 points and I'm innocent. And you hope by the time the election comes, authorities will say you're innocent also. That didn't happen to him, and I think that weighed on his campaign, I think.
Well, and so, you know, if you're him and you see all this constant churn that's happened in the second district for the ultimate winner of that seat, you have to think to yourself, well, maybe there'll be some more churn here in 2020.
Right.
You know,
I think in the 20 years, in the last 20 years, nobody has held that district more than 3 terms.
Yeah.
So.
All right, we are going to take a little bit of a break, guys, and we're going to share with you our news cut in right now and go to the main news desk.
It's election night. More and more results are starting to come in. I'm Nicole. Let's get a check on one of the biggest races we are watching tonight. That would be Virginia Beach Mayor. Right now, incumbent Mayor Bobby Dyer is at about 62%, Jody Wagner at 32%, and R.K. Kowalowicz is at 6%. Megan Shin and Eugene Daniel have been following the Dyer and Wagner campaigns all day. Let's start with an update now from Megan. Hey, Megan.
Well, Nicole, Bobby Dyer just got here, and we've been following him mainly all day. And we know that, as you just said, those numbers came in. You're about 42,000 votes so far. Mayor Dyer, what do you think of that?
I'm humbled. And, this is the people's, expressing their will. And I was so delighted over the last couple of weeks to see people out and voting and doing their thing. It doesn't matter who they vote for. People are out there caring about their country, and they're caring about their city.
And if you have another 4 years as mayor, what's your main focus?
I tell you what, people, remembering that, we're going to come together as a community and, spur that economic development to help pay the bills for the flooding and the teachers and the police, but also to keep people your age that, graduate from the universities, that they have a job that they can work right here in their city, Virginia Beach.
Well, we appreciate your time, Mayor Dyer, and we'll send it back to you guys in the studio. Live from the Westin in Town Center, Megan Shin, 13 News Now.
All right, Megan, thank you. Challenger Jody Wagner is also waiting out the results in Virginia Beach tonight. Eugene Daniel joins us live from where her campaign is watching your vote. Eugene?
Yeah, Jody Wagner and her campaign taking a different route than the Dyer team and opting for a more intimate, small gathering of supporters, family, and friends. Now, early polls, as you showed earlier just then, that shows that she's down right now to Dyer. However, she's hoping that as more votes are counted, that her luck can change. Now, the small business owner and former state treasurer said that she felt good earlier today after spending the day visiting the polls and talking with voters. She says the response was positive from both Republicans and Democrats. Now, she's campaigning on improving the economy, navigating this COVID-19 pandemic, and improving transportation. Of course, we'll see as we go through the night if voters will give her a chance to do that. In Virginia Beach, Eugene Daniel, 13 News Now.
All right, here's a check of the mayoral race in Portsmouth. Right now, Danny Meeks is in the lead with 37%, followed by Councilman Shannon Glover and Councilman Paul Battle. Allie Weatherton is in Portsmouth with an update. Hey, Allie.
Hey, Nicole, like you mentioned, it's really looking good for Danny Meeks. I just checked a few minutes ago. He is still number one with about 37% of votes. Right now, about 17 out of 32 precincts are reporting. Now, Councilman Shannon Glover is runner-up at about 27% of votes, which is about 900 votes less than Meeks. Both candidates spent several hours talking to voters today at the Scottish Rite Center polling location. Now, if Meeks indeed wins, he wants to focus on maintaining the bond rating in the city, supporting the schools and police, creating a technology zone to bring more jobs to Portsmouth, and plans to fight the tolls. Meeks says if citizens want the casino and if everybody votes for the casino, which it seems to be happening right now, that he will do his best to make sure that casino comes to Portsmouth and it is successful. Live in Portsmouth, Allie Weatherton, 13 News Now.
And there were two amendments up for a vote in Virginia. Let's go to Brian Farrell for an update on those. Brian.
Yeah, Nicole, the first one was on redistricting. That would set up a commission made up of lawmakers and private citizens who would then determine the districts for Virginia as well as the congressional districts. So right now, 70%, we're approaching there. 66.9% are saying yes. 33% have voted against that measure. At this point, that's not been called by the AP. What has, though, is that car tax exemption for disabled vets and their spouses that would get rid of the property tax.
Brian, thank you. Remember, 13 News Now has an online-only election special going on right now, and you can find that on 13newsnow.com, our app, our Facebook page, and our YouTube channel. Stay with us for another live update in 30 minutes.
All right, we are back on our digital special here. I'm Janet Roach here with Mike Gooding and political analyst Quentin Kidd talking about the races and getting all the updates and the analysis for you on this exciting election night. Okay, we were just talking about the Luria Scott Taylor race. We know right now that Luria is down, but a lot of the vote is not in at this point. Hey guys, you there? Were you with me?
Yeah, we're with you.
Okay. All right. Wanted to talk a little bit more, Quentin, about what you were saying about that one issue that was just sort of overshadowed Scott Taylor with the signatures that were forged in that last 2018 race, but he only lost by 6,000 votes. So really I think he felt like a lot of supporters came to him and said, hey, you need to get back in this, which is exactly what he did, and he may be successful tonight.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if he, he said, and he continues to maintain to this day, he's innocent, he did nothing wrong, he didn't know about it, and whatever crimes were committed by staffers who were going to have to deal with that. And he had supporters come to him and say, look, if you're really innocent, then go back at it and try to get this seat back. The 2nd Congressional District is a competitive district, but it is a competitive district that leans Republican. And so, in Republicans' minds, in Scott Taylor's thinking, I would imagine he thought it's a presidential year. Republicans are going to turn out in big numbers. They're going to be enthusiastic. If there's ever a year to try to go back and get that seat, this is the year to do it. And you're right, he may be successful at that. We'll know. We probably won't know until tomorrow morning sometime, but we'll know soon enough.
It seemed like that one instant kind of backfired on him when he called out Elaine Luria for saying something about him being under investigation still because of that issue, and called her out for that, but yet when the news media checked with the prosecutor, he did say that everyone in the campaign, involved in the campaign, including Scott Taylor, are still under investigation. That didn't go very well for him, but maybe who knows how that's going to play out in this race.
My sense is, and I think that was Mike that broke that story, my sense is that he was trying to get out ahead of what he understood to be another indictment coming, a former campaign staffer.
He issued the cease and desist order
Yeah.
to Luria to tell her to stop saying it.
Yeah.
And so that was in the middle of the summer.
Yeah.
We weren't thinking about it at all. But by him issuing the letter and then issuing a press release about the fact that he'd issued the letter, gave us the excuse to re-look at the entire case. So yeah, Channel 13, we called the prosecutor out in Roanoke. And that's when he said what he said, that
the whole campaign was still under investigation. And then not some weeks later, a third campaign staffer from that 2018 campaign was indicted.
So 2 have been convicted and 1 has been indicted.
Right. And so and the campaign is still under investigation. That 28 campaign is still under investigation. So I think Taylor did make this a story in the 2018 campaign again, more than it may have been otherwise. Although I imagine when that third indictment came out, it would have been a story. It would have made a story.
So he was trying to get ahead of it.
He was trying to get ahead of it.
But at the time, I remember I called you and I said, doesn't this seem like an unforced error? And you said, yeah.
Well, yeah, because what we knew at the time was he raised this issue, and there was no reason to raise it because that made us start talking about it. What we didn't realize was that there was a third indictment coming.
Yeah, and so, one thing to keep in mind here, as close as this race certainly appears to be right now, either one of them could go to Washington in January. It could be Luria going back, or it could be Taylor going back. If it is Taylor who goes back, Luria right now sits on the House Armed Services Committee, and she sits on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, where she is a chairwoman of a subcommittee on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. Taylor has already stated that he wants to be on the Appropriations Committee, which he was on before he got defeated 2 years ago. I'm just wondering, for Hampton Roads, Taylor would argue, well, being on the Appropriations Committee is more vital because that's bringing home the bacon. So I wonder what constituents could look forward to in the coming 2 years if that's the way it plays out.
So constituents, either one of them will provide, I would imagine, good constituency service, as good as they could provide.
Which became a campaign issue.
Which became a campaign issue. I realize as I'm saying that became a campaign issue. But again, we're talking about either in either case, a member of Congress who is in their second term, either second term for Scott Taylor, who sat out a term, or second term for Elaine Luria, who won re-election. And in the House of Representatives, that's not much seniority. No. And so it'll be an important voice for the 2nd District, but again, it'll be a voice without much seniority.
And as of this very second, we just had a board up that I don't think had any numbers on it, but the most recent from the State Department of Elections certainly looks good for Taylor at this point. But as you point out very aptly, that there are still perhaps twice as many early vote absentee votes as there are cast today votes.
Right.
So what appears to be reality right now could end up being a mirage.
Yeah, what we have to this year, and this may be something that we have to get used to going forward. We have to start using this term, thinking about it like this, using this phrase, expected vote, not election vote or election day vote, but expected vote, because we have voters who can vote weeks early, and then we have voters who vote on election day. And in Virginia, those are historically in Virginia, a very small percentage of people voted early. The vast majority of people voted on election day. We knew the results pretty early. This year, 3 million of about 4.5 million or so votes were cast early. We're not going to know the answers to all those
So the fact
totals.
that right now we're looking at her being down by 43,000 to 70,000 votes. That's a lot of votes.
It's a lot of votes.
Is it that many votes when you're talking about what you're talking about with these early votes?
No, yeah, I mean, look, it is
a surmountable number.
It's a surmountable number, unless
it's not.
Unless it's not. Unless that early vote also favored Scott Taylor.
But in your polling, you found of people that early voted, twice as many people voted for Luria as voted for Taylor.
Yeah, we found a 2-to-1 advantage for Luria, and nationally it's been the case. In Virginia, we don't register by party, so we can't track it by voter registration. But nationally, in states where there was party registration or is party registration, there was about a 2-to-1 Democratic advantage in early voting. And that makes sense. You know, that's not a partisan statement. That makes sense. That's why the president was railing against early voting and not wanting people to vote early. He could see that there was a Democratic advantage in early voting, and so it's not a surprise. We know that there's a Democratic advantage in early voting. The question is, how big is that advantage, and is it big enough to overcome the election day vote totals?
One thing worth pointing out here for second district constituents is if the military and the Navy is your big concern, you're going to be fine no matter who gets elected.
Right.
Because Scott Taylor, of course, was a sniper in the Navy SEALs, and Elaine Luria was a 20-year officer, Naval Academy graduate, and retired commander. So the second district is going to be well served in that regard, regardless of who prevails tonight.
The second district has the most. The second highest percentage of military or military retired voters, and so that's an important issue for the second district.
Well, I know this because I tend to get around to the VFW and the Vietnam veterans and the American Legion. I see all those folks, and yes, there are a great many of them, and they care deeply about this.
Yep.
You know, some people were thinking that a lot of the criticism that we heard from Scott Taylor in the campaign, the way he threw a lot out there at Elaine Luria, saying that she votes with Nancy Pelosi, and some of the other things didn't seem to stick. People may be questioning that tonight, that maybe some things did stick more so than what people originally thought. I thought when that came up during the debate that Luria handled that by when Scott Taylor tried to talk about her investments, she sort of turned that around and just kind of seemed to have sort of a confident posture there where things seemed to be falling off of her. But people might be rethinking that tonight if these numbers don't come up for her.
Janet, I was at that debate, and it did seem to me that Elaine Luria had an answer to every one of Scott Taylor's insults, for lack of a better phrase. So to your point, when Taylor tried to raise the issue of her personal retirement portfolio investments and the fact that some of those, which are in blind trusts, have some connection to some Chinese investment firms, as probably many of us who have 401ks, probably we don't even know it and have some investments in China that we don't know about. Taylor tried to make an issue about that. And then in that very debate, Luria anticipated that And she immediately snapped back. Well, I didn't think we were going to be talking about our personal finances, but if you want to talk about personal finances, hey, let's talk about your bankruptcies. Hey, let's talk about your property taxes that you haven't paid. So Luria was ready for that one. And then on the Nancy Pelosi thing, that was another one where Taylor has, on the commercials and out on the campaign trail, has again and again tried to broad brush her with Nancy Pelosi. She votes with Pelosi 92% of the time, he says all the time. Luria didn't miss a beat in that debate. This was before the Hampton Roads Chamber about 10 days ago, 12 days ago. She says, look, yes, I did vote with Nancy Pelosi in my 2-year term 72 times. Do you know how many times you voted with Nancy Pelosi? 310 times. So the point is, I don't know if any of this stuff sticks. Maybe it does. The results thus far seem to suggest that maybe they are sticking.
Yeah, and I would argue that if Elaine Luria loses and Scott Taylor wins, it isn't going to be because of either of the debates. Because, you know, quite frankly, you know, the chamber debate is before a closed audience. It's not like, you know, the first debate was a more public debate, but, you know, it wasn't a widespread audience. It's going to be because voters in the 2nd District, for whatever reason, decided that that they regret not re-electing him in 2018. And they want to go back and give him another shot.
Which is kind of counter to one part of your polling. Ask people in the 2nd District, what's the single most important thing to you? And the number one thing was the signatures.
Right. Yeah, again, I'm withholding judgment at this point. You know, in the 2nd Congressional District race, as of this moment, 34% of the expected vote is actually in. So I'm withholding judgment at this point, and still, you know, I'm still going to, you know, have confidence in our polling. But if we were wrong, it'll be because the 2nd District voters had essentially buyer's regret, and they decided they wanted to go back to, you know, the congressman that they had 2 years ago.
I'm trying to recall, have we ever had in the 2nd District a situation like this where we had somebody that was in, and then they got the boot, and then they were out for a while, and then they tried to come back again, and then they won? At least in my lifetime, we haven't had that in the 2nd District.
Yeah, not in our or our grandparents' lifetimes, probably. You might have to go back into ancient history to find something like that. Again, in the last 45 years, there have been 8 people. Yeah. And, you know, for 30 of those years, it was 2 people. Right. You know, Owen Pickett and Bill Whitehurst were very similar politically. One was a Democrat, one was a Republican.
You could not possibly tell the difference.
That's right. You would find it hard to actually tell the difference.
It was more collegial times.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to take a little break here and head over to Portsmouth to talk more about the mayoral race there. Allie Weatherton is live. She's been covering that race. She's interviewed all 6 candidates, and at last check, Danny Meeks was ahead with about 37% of the vote in. So let's check in again with Allie.
Yeah, Janet, you are exactly right. Danny Meeks is number 1 right now for the Portsmouth mayor. But like you said, last we checked, he has about 37% of the votes. And right now, about 19 out of 32 precincts are reporting. Now, Councilman Shannon Glover is a hard number 2 right now with about 27% of the votes. You know, we talked a lot with Meeks earlier today, and he says he wants to focus on the economy. He wants to focus on the roads. He wants to build a hub and change the downtown scenery. So he has a lot of visions for Portsmouth, and he says that he's going to make those happen if he wins. So we're still trying to wait to see if those official results come in. But right now, Meeks is number 1 for mayor. We are expected to talk to him soon. Shannon Glover is right down the street. We are hoping to maybe talk to him as well and see kind of what people are feeling. So that's the latest here. Meeks is number 1 and Shannon Glover is number 2.
All right, Allie, thank you. Number 1 out of 6 candidates there in Portsmouth. All right, to Virginia Beach, and Megan Chin is watching the mayoral race there between Bobby Dyer and Jody Wagner. And Bobby Dyer feeling pretty good right now, Megan.
Well, Nicole, as you just heard, we did a live interview with Bobby Dyer, and he and his wife just showed up here less than an hour ago to the West End and Town Center. You know that he's running for being a mayor for another term, for another good 4 years at this point. And at this point, he is leading with a good 44,000 votes so far as we could see online. Now, he is up against 2 other people, and Dyer says that he has the experience, he has all of the job experience that he brings from his previous time as being the mayor and also being a part of Virginia Beach City employees since 2004. So that's a good amount of time. You can see the crowd behind us is quite busy right now. You can even hear them behind me. This is a stark difference from where my colleague Eugene Daniel is actually experiencing covering Wagner's candidacy at this point in time. And during this whole situation, Dyer says that, you know, he's celebrating some big accomplishments from the previous year, 2 years with Something in the Water, also handling some really tough situations, including the Virginia Beach mass shooting. You know, he really hopes to leave a legacy that he's proud of, even if he doesn't get the re-election. And he's running his campaign really on the message of community and unity in this situation. He says that he plans to hold another unity event in January if he does end up winning in this situation. And as a quote from Dyer, he says years from now, he wants the city of Virginia Beach to be known as a template for the nation in how the community came together during adversity. So that's really the campaign that Dyer is running on in this situation. And we're hoping to continue to see how everything unfolds tonight. Of course, at this point, Dyer is leading, but that could change. Live in Virginia Beach, Megan Shin, 13 News Now.
Okay, Megan, thank you. Yeah, according to the results that we have here, Dyer, 44,380 votes, and Jody Wagner, 24,270. That is as of right now. Let's find out what's going on with Jody Wagner and her get-together. Eugene Daniel is live there, and he joins us. Hey, Eugene.
Hey, and you know what? You just listed out those numbers, but from the attitudes of people here, you wouldn't know. There's still laughter, people who are smiling, as it's a very small, intimate group of people here for Jody Wagner's campaign, opting for close family, friends, and supporter. Now, the former state treasurer and finance secretary has been campaigning on improving the economy, particularly navigating through this COVID-19 pandemic, modernizing schools, and also bringing more diversity within the community. And earlier today, she said she felt pretty good about her chances tonight as she talked to people. I'm actually going to bring in Jody Wagner right now to talk to us. Poll numbers right now are showing that you are down, but you had a really good feeling today when you talked to people. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling frustrated because none of the early voting data is in, and we know that more people voted early than voted today. And I really think that, you know, we had strong perception. When I was at the polls early, people were very receptive, and I felt very good about it. So I feel like there are a lot of votes that have not been counted, and I'm waiting for those anxiously. And today, I really felt good about the people that weren't Democrats that were telling me that they were voting for me. You know, people that said, I've never voted for a Democrat before, and I voted for you.
And you know, one of the big things that you've been pushing on has been to improve the economy within the area, particularly as a small business owner. I know that's come up a lot in the conversations that you told me earlier today that you were having with people. How important is that, particularly as we're in this pandemic, to move forward with the economy within the area?
Absolutely essential. The only way we're going to get out of this is if we're able to have businesses restart and bring in new businesses. And one of the challenges in Virginia Beach is that our permitting process is really delayed, and it takes a long time to get something approved. And as these businesses want to get going, you know, restaurants that had shut down and want to reopen, businesses that have failed and the owners are ready to restart, we have to be in a position where we get them to do it very quickly so that they aren't waiting 6 months or a year so that they can get started.
All right, and I know you're hoping that voters will give you a chance to be able to be a part of that process and pushing things forward. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Absolutely. So again, a small gathering here as we wait out the results for Jody Wagner versus Bobby Dyer. Eugene Daniel in Virginia Beach, 13 News Now.
All right, Eugene, thank you. And so this is just how weird this year voting is because of all this early vote and all the people that showed up standing in line and all the people who mailed in the ballots. You heard what Jody Wagner said, that she's frustrated because the early vote count is not in. So we just got this tweet from Evan Watson, and he says, he confirms from Registrar Donna Patterson in Virginia Beach, the numbers you're seeing online at VBElections, vbgov.com, and that's what I have pulled up right here, those numbers that I just read out, are currently from today's in-person voting. Absentee ballots and early in-person voting numbers have not been posted as of yet. So we could see some major changes in these totals right now. So again, we're still waiting for all this to play out. Just a weird year. It's 2020, right? So we're expecting things just to kind of be crazy. Your reaction to that, Mike and Quentin?
Well, it strikes me, Quentin, that's Virginia Beach. I don't know that that helps Elaine Luria. I don't think it does.
Well, but it's not just Virginia Beach, it's all of the localities. There are 10 localities in the 2nd Congressional District. Only one of those 10 is reporting any early absentee numbers.
But specifically to what Janet was talking about, what Donna Patterson, the Virginia Beach registrar,
That's true,
said,
yeah.
I think most of those numbers are going to come back in Taylor's favor.
Right. To your point, and we don't. And also, we're talking about a 1.5 to 1 early vote to election day vote, a 2 to 1 early vote to election day vote, advantage to the early vote. And so, to her point, there's still potentially up to 2/3 of the vote out still.
Something I'd like to ask you about, and just because this was my own personal experience, I want to hear you react to. These last 2 weeks when we had early voting, I must have gone 10 times to the Fairfield Shopping Center in Virginia Beach where there was a satellite office set up to vote. And there were people in line every single day for the entire 2 weeks, from anywhere from 3 to 7 hours waiting to vote early.
Right.
Today, I went to my home precinct to vote, and I walked right in the door. They checked my ID. Within 40 seconds, I was voting, and within 5 minutes, I was in my car and driving home.
Yep. The same, I live in Newport News, the same kind of scenario played out in Newport News, either in City Center where they had an early vote location, or downtown at City Hall. Lines usually, not that long, but lines. This morning, I'm an election day voter. I like the whole experience.
It's your Super Bowl.
It's my, yeah. I mean, I want to vote election. I want to feel the election day. I didn't wait at all. I breezed right in. That is an example of what we're talking about when we say there's about a 2 to 1 advantage early vote to election day vote. There were tons of early votes cast. There were lots of election day votes cast, but tons of early votes cast.
Do you think the early voters now, based upon what we're talking about, have some buyer's remorse, and they're saying to themselves, why did I wait in that line for 7 hours? I could have done what that Gooding guy did and been in and out in 30 seconds.
Yeah, and what those early voters are suffering right now is the same thing we're all suffering, which is, we're pulling our hair out, what little hair we have left, saying these numbers don't make sense. This is not how numbers come in. Only 1/3 of the votes in. How can they be calling Virginia, et cetera? That's what massive early voting gets. Now, we're just not used to this in Virginia. I have to say, in states like Washington and Oregon, where all voting is done by mail, the system is structured in such a way where they process.
States, right?
Colorado,
Hawaii, Colorado,
Oregon, and Washington, right? They've got a system in place where they process those ballots quickly. They get results in on time. People don't go through the sort of anxiety that people in Virginia and other states might be going through now. It's a matter of what we're used to, our
so
habit.
Maybe if we did this for a couple more elections, we'd be in a better place of accepting of the way it is.
Sure. I mean, and look, I think if Virginia Virginia allows local registrars to process ballots early, which means open the envelopes, verify the signatures, but not count them. So if Virginia law would allow registrars to start counting those early votes the morning of Election Day, so that they could have those totals available when the polls close, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now. Now, that isn't a criticism of Virginia law or Virginia election officials. We're doing the best we can in the age of coronavirus in 2020.
Well, and really, listen to you and me. Here's a guy who teaches this stuff for a living, and here's a guy who broadcasts this stuff for a living. And all we would have said in past years was, gee, I wish more people would have voted.
That's
so
right.
now a system has been created where way more than ever people vote. You think we're going to set a record?
I think we're going to set a record in Virginia
So
this year.
the more people that vote, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
For democracy.
Yeah. And this is, look, I was prepared for this. You know, I was prepared to have an early vote come in and say to myself, okay, that's only a third of the vote. There's still more coming. I was prepared not to know until tomorrow how Virginia went. I was surprised when the AP called it 37 minutes after the polls closed. That's their modeling and their algorithm. I get it. But I'm prepared for the long haul on this one.
I'm just still looking at the numbers from Associated Press right now. It still has Trump winning 56-41, but yet it's been called for Biden in Virginia.
Right.
It's just stupefying.
And that's also what we're seeing playing out nationally. If you recall, leading up to the election, you know, there were these reports that President Trump would declare victory based on the voting today, you know, based on the in-person going to the polls on Election Day, because those numbers would favor Republicans. And there were some Democrats who were getting nervous about that, about what kind of turmoil that might lead to, because it would be before all the early votes were counted. That's the same thing playing out in some of these states right now, right, Quentin?
That's exactly right. Look, North Carolina, 84% of the vote is in. AP is not called North Carolina. 93% of the votes in Florida. AP is not called Florida. 76% of the votes in Texas. AP is not called Texas. Why? Because those states are so close that whatever happens with the remaining 16% or 7% of the vote could literally change the results. And so the AP is essentially being cautious where it needs to be, essentially.
Except in Virginia.
They don't feel like they need to be cautious in Virginia, I guess.
Okay. All right, so we're going to take another quick break and head to our other studio and the news desk there with Nicole Livas, and she has an election night cut in for us. All right, are we ready for that? All right, it's David Allen, so stand by for that, and we'll be back right after this cut-in.
It's a busy election night. I'm David Allen. As more and more results come in, many people are asking, are casinos coming to Hampton Roads? Alex Little-Hales is live with an update on what early returns are showing. Alex.
Well, David, at this moment, with several precincts in both Norfolk and Portsmouth now reporting some early numbers, we can see that more people are voting yes than no to those casinos in this area on about a 2-to-1 ratio, at least from what we're seeing right now. In Norfolk, some of those exact numbers, more than half of the precincts are reporting. In Portsmouth, about 2/3 of those precincts, again, reporting numbers that are about a 2-to-1 ratio, about 66 to 68% people, voters voting yes to casinos. And again, these are just two of the 4 cities in the Commonwealth that are expected to be voting on casinos in Virginia this year. This comes after Virginia lawmakers earlier in 2020 passed both casino and sports betting laws in the General Assembly. And both casinos, both promising to bring job creation and tax revenue, but have also been met with opposition by concerned citizens and other candidates. Remember, these numbers are not finalized. We've been saying that all night, so make sure you stay tuned to 13 News Now for the latest election results. From Norfolk Tonight, I'm Alex Little-Hales for 13 News Now. Back to you.
All right, yeah, early numbers. Let's check in with Evan Watson. He's live at the Virginia Beach Convention Center where they're counting ballots, a very complicated process in this election. And Evan, you just got an update from the registrar.
Yes, well, first, Virginia Department of Elections Commissioner Chris Piper tells me that absentee ballots are being processed later, that currently what we're seeing in results right now are today's in-person voting. For most localities, absentee and early voting numbers have yet to be posted, and Virginia Beach Registrar Donna Patterson just confirmed to me that that is the case here. Current in-person today votes have been processed first. Absentee votes come later. So that's part of the process here today, and it's likely a majority of Virginians voted early this election cycle. Evan Watson reporting for 13 News Now.
All right, we're watching those absentee ballots. Stay with us. More coming up in about 30 minutes. Now back to ABC News.
All right, election night 2020. We're back here with our digital special, election special, here at 13 News Now. I'm here with Mike Gooding and political analyst from CNU, Quentin Kidd, and we've been just chatting about these results all night and just what has come in and what hasn't come in. So, Quentin, what would you say you're watching the most right now?
I'm watching the percentage of the election day vote that's come in and how big of a lead that gives Republicans in these various races, like this second congressional district race, because that's the lead that Democrats have to try to overcome with those early votes if they're going to overcome and win in those races. Because again, it was expected that there would be a Democratic advantage in the early vote, a Republican advantage in the election day vote. I'm also watching the constitutional amendments and these casino gambling referendums in the various cities. I just think those are really interesting questions that are being put before voters around the state and in those various cities.
Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking we think we might know some stuff right now. And I'm thinking we're going to get up in the morning and everything we thought we knew at 10 o'clock Tuesday night, we were totally wrong about.
Yeah, we're seeing shadows on a wall, and we're gonna turn around in a moment and realize that they were, they were figments of our imagination. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It is our anticipation driving this. There's nothing wrong with taking 24, 48 hours to know the results of an election. It is only in modern days with all of this, with the instantaneous news and technology, that we've actually known the results of elections early. I mean, there's a reason, for example, that we have an election on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, but a new president isn't sworn in until January.
Right.
Because historically we had to give time for votes to be counted and time for people to travel from wherever they live to Washington, D.C. to take the oath of office. I mean, the structure of our elections is built around a pre-digital age, but our anticipation is a digital age anticipation.
And our problem is, because we're social media hounds, we want instant gratification.
That's right.
And we're just not getting it.
Right.
And so that's why we seem a little bit perturbed tonight, is because we want to sound authoritative and like we're smart. And the reality is I'm feeling as stupid as all get out tonight.
I'm accepting the unknown at this point. And the unknown is across the state, about 3 million early votes. I'm accepting that we don't know the results of those yet.
I'm looking at the U.S. Senate race here. And you remember early in the night, Daniel Gade had a great big lead, but the Associated Press called it early for Mark Warner. Well, now they're both at 1.2 million, and there's still
about 45% of the vote out.
Yeah, still 45% of the vote out. So
right.
Yeah.
And if you start looking at so as the percentage of the vote out dwindles, what you're going to notice concomitantly is the percentage of the early vote in grows, because that's where those two percentages are going to cross each other.
Okay. All right, guys, we are getting ready to wrap up our digital special. I certainly appreciate all of your insight, your cerebral expertise.
Or in the reporter's case, the lack of insight. I did what I could to overcome it, but I don't know that I succeeded.
No, Mike, you always do a good job. Just any more final thoughts before we wrap this up?
It looks like the redistricting constitutional amendment is going to pass. By 65% of the vote. The property tax exemption for disabled veterans is strongly 85% yes. And Bristol City and Danville have already approved their casino gambling referendums. Norfolk, the referendum is leading in Norfolk right now and leading in Portsmouth right now. So it could very well be that all 4 cities approve casino gambling, and those 2 constitutional amendments look like they're going to pass today.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, we'll be watching that and continue to watch all of these races probably well into the night in the next several days to come. Make sure you stay logged on to 13newsnow.com. Of course, we're keeping you updated there. There's our app as well. And make sure you join us on Channel 13, 13 News Now, at 11 o'clock for more analysis and more updates. We appreciate you logging on and joining us for our digital election special. I'm Janet Roach. Have a wonderful evening.